Hi, everyone. This is Avery Peel, host of the Hope Matrix on Campus podcast. We are here to share the science, strategies, and stories for how to hope. I am the Community Hope Specialist at the Shine Hope Company, and Shine is the mnemonic for how we teach hope. So when we talk about hope, we talk about the stress skills, happiness habits, inspired actions, nourishing networks, and eliminating challenges, which are the thinking patterns that get in the way of our ability to hope. Hope is a skill. You can measure hope, you can teach hope, and you can start practicing skills to activate higher hope in your life today. And on this Hope Matrix on Campus podcast, we aim to bring in guests, experts in science, people with stories, and those that have strategies for activating hope in your life. My name is Avery Peel, and this is the Hope Matrix on campus. This is really terrifying to be starting a podcast, but we're going to have so much fun, and I'm really excited to have my guest here today, my boss, my CEO and founder of the Shine Hope Company, Miss Kathryn Goetzke. Hi.
Hello, Miss Avery Peel. You know about you. Gosh, I hate the word boss, you know. It's such a... I know. I know.
Boss. That's what you are. No, I'm happy.
Oh,
I'm so happy about it. Miss Kathryn is from Chicago, Illinois. She flew in from Chicago to come visit Arkansas, just to come see me.
that's right. That's Avery. I did, yeah.
We're very grateful for her and everything she does for us. So we are going to deep dive into her story and why she created this company and all of the research that went behind it.
Yes, we are, and I'm so grateful to be here. So I host a podcast, The Hope Matrix, and Miss Avery's working on a college campus activation of hope through our Hopeful Mindsets course for the college campus. And she said, why don't we do a podcast for the campus? And I said, that's great, Avery, you can run it. So she thought, oh my goodness.
Little did I know, I wasn't planning on running it. I know. We got it today, and I'm so excited. This is my first podcast ever.
Yeah, it's a new experience. So and that's the thing about hope. You got to do challenging, hard things. So just breathe through this, Avery. You got this.
Yay! Okay. Okay, so let's get into why you created the Shine Hope Company. And how did you come up with the name Shine Hope? Why the sunflower? Why yellow? Oh, let's get into it all.
Any question? I know. Yeah. Where do we start?
How did you create the Shine Hope Company?
Well, yeah, it's super interesting. So I had another company called the Mood Factory. I had a product line of light bulbs I eventually got it in Lowe's Home Improvement, but you know, I started that company based on research that we are out of the present moment. And again, this was 20 years ago, so this research, I'm sure, has changed significantly. So we're out of the present moment. It was 47% of the time. So 20 years ago, we were either thinking about the future, worrying, or ruminating on the past. And if we would just get into the present moment, we could have a significant impact on our happiness. And so I set about creating this company to teach people how to engage senses, to get into the present moment, being intentional, using colors first to starting with light bulbs, developed a product line, got it in Lowe's Home Improvement, got it in some other retailers, and I got a big deal with Lowe's Home Improvement, a licensing deal. And so I had a manufacturer license for me, and then we did the first nationwide cause marketing campaign for mental health through that company. And so we can get into my story a little bit, but I cared a lot about mental health. So I was going to support another nonprofit through cause marketing, but, eventually after doing some research, started my own nonprofit. And so about 10 years, ended up with 9 million light bulbs or so selling. I know, it's really fun. And at the time, there were just incandescents on the market, which you probably don't even know what those are.
No, I know what that's for.
It was like all that we had for lighting were those incandescent light bulbs. Now we have LEDs and we had CFLs and all of these things. But, they were making white light bulbs, but they didn't have colors, or it wasn't mass market colors. So I created this. I went over to China. I met with manufacturers. I got the director of the Pantone Institute on my advisory board and studied colors, did a white paper on colors and moods, and it was really fun. But anyway, so we sold these light bulbs, raised some money, and I wanted to create a program for suicide prevention. And because I was looking at what they were talking about for prevention, and it was primarily prevention in times of crisis. So, 800 numbers, and what do you do when you're in crisis? And that's so far along the mental health journey when you get to being suicidal. I thought to really prevent it, you have to get at root cause. And across all of the literature, hopelessness is the single consistent predictor of suicide. And I read this study after study after study, hopelessness. And so I thought, what is hopelessness? And how do you get out of hopelessness into really what I consider to be the opposite, which is hope? And so I created a program to do that. And I was able to prove that you could teach hope. And as we increased hope, anxiety and depressive symptoms went down. And so I put the other company to the side. I thought this is the most important thing I can be doing on this planet. I think if we can teach hope, we can end suicide ultimately, and also violence and all kinds of things. So that's kind of where it all stemmed from. And now I'm absolutely obsessed, as you know. And so I'm finding out, teaching everyone globally, like, hopelessness is normal. It's a normal experience. We have moments of hopelessness all the time. When you break down hopelessness, what it is, and it's how we manage those moments of hopelessness that matter. And if they become it becomes persistent hopelessness. That's when you develop clinical anxiety or depression and become suicidal or violent, or, turn to addiction, or all of these things. So, yes, kind of a long answer. And
No, that is amazing. Thank you for sharing all of that. And thank you for creating this company. You are going to help so many people. So next I want to get into the SHINE framework. You talked a lot about SHINE, and that is like in the name of your company, literally. So how did you come up with this framework? What does it stand for? All of that.
All the stuff.
All of that stuff.
Yeah. So SHINE Hope came from, I developed that maybe 3 or 4 years ago. But I did this, was able to prove out that you could teach hope. And we started with 7 to 11-year-olds. And, had the basic structure for how you teach it. But I'm a branding and marketing person by trade. When I got into mental health 20 years ago, I said we need to rebrand depression. We need to stop focusing on, all this negative imagery and the symptoms, as opposed to, the success and the treatments and universal symbolism and all of these things. So I knew I needed to create some kind of a brand for hope, and something that was memorable, repeatable, and that taught while we talked about it. So, we came out with the basic curriculums for young kids, and then I said, how do I turn that into, everyone said, you need a mnemonic. I'm like, what's a mnemonic? So basically kind of an acronym. And so I took what the key components of that we were teaching in Hope, and I turned it into, I turned it into a word, which is SHINE. So, I used to, the nonprofit, when I started, it was the International Foundation for Research and Education on Depression. And a couple of years ago, we rebranded, and instead of removing the word depression, we crossed it out and we put hope, because I really believe that if you learn how to hope, and we need to be studying hope, we know enough about depression. You never know enough, but, I wanted to focus on how we get to hope, how we navigate depression and get back to hope. And so, and we did not change the letter because it would have been IFRA. That just doesn't, yeah, it doesn't have the same ring. So it's IFRAD. We kept it that, but rebranding depression. And so, I spent 10 years just speaking all over the world about the need to get celebrities engaged. And we did some of that, get leaders talking about mental health, being open about it, being open about struggles. Back then, very few people were talking. A lot of scientists were talking about it, and we're kind of leading the charge in that. And my dad died by suicide. So, it's something very personal for me. I had my own attempt in my 20s and struggled a lot and was diagnosed with a lot of different things. And fundamentally, I think for me, it was driven really by hopelessness. And so to me, creating this brand around hope, how do we teach hope in a memorable way? So we came up with the shine. I basically put down everything I was teaching, and then how do we turn that into a word? And so the name of the nonprofit being IFRA, but our tagline was shine a light on depression and then shine a light on hope. And so shine was already something that we were using a lot, and it's something we talk about a lot. And it just kind of worked. It worked very beautifully. So shine stands for stress skills, happiness habits, inspired actions, nourishing networks, and eliminating challenges. And that's the framework, and I can get more into each one. I developed it too because I was working with the mayor of Reno at the time to activate our city of Reno through developing kind of a way we can activate cities. And so through a Hopeful Cities activation. And when she asked me to do that, I thought, all I have is this programming for young kids. I need to turn that into, I need to figure out how to teach everyone. I want everyone to know how to hope. And so that's when I thought I really need a mnemonic. And then we came up with that, the Shine Hope. And we now use that. We have programs for all different, we have a teen program now that we didn't have, the college course now that we didn't have back then. We have a veterans program. We have a workplace program. We have a general course for the general public. And, really the goal being, I want everyone to learn how to shine hope, so that no matter what they go through in life, we all have challenges. And if we use the Shine Hope frame, we have to shine brighter when we don't want to, when we go through challenges. That's when we stop shining, and that's when we need to shine even more. So yeah, that's how it all evolved. Did I get through it's just happiness habits, inspired actions, nourishing
eliminating challenges.
Yes, Haley's been doing
Wow, you have an incredible story.
Oh,
I feel like I learn more about you every single time we talk. This is truly incredible.
Yeah, thank you.
So before we get started into your background and your story, I just want to ask one more thing. And what is your vision for the college campus?
Oh my gosh. Well, here's the deal. I believe, I have the framework, and I always kind of tell people, I can teach you the framework, but you've got to activate the skills in your own life. And I can't tell you, you've got to teach me how to apply them to your own situation, because we all have different challenges. And in undergrad, so I lost my dad when I was a freshman in Iowa, and I lasted another year of school before I left because I was in so much trauma. And I think I went to 7 schools, 7 undergrad schools. And not that any of it, I loved college, I loved learning, but I was pretty active in addiction. And so I wasn't learning to probably 10% of my capacity for learning. So I struggled a lot. And, so I wanted something that we could get on the college campus that could have evidence and efficacy and could be a whole school approach. So everyone needs to learn how to hope, because hope predicts your retention. So if you stay in school, if I'd been higher in hope and been more supported from a university standpoint, I think I would have stayed at my one school. And I don't have regrets about leaving, and yet, I think it would have been really beneficial. And, I was at the University of Iowa, a massive campus. I mean, my sorority was super helpful. My friends were helpful, but there's just only so much that everyone can do. And I think campuses have an obligation to students as well. So the idea is that everyone on campus learns it, and then they know where to go for resources should they have any challenge, whether it's loss of a parent or a family member or, an assault on campus. We know that I think it's 40% of girls get sexually assaulted on campus, which is just shocking. And
absolutely,
addiction, health health challenges, financial, food insecurity, housing, just kind of there's so many things, there's so many challenges. And so it's to provide a, resource for doing so. But more than anything, I'd like the kids you're not kids, sorry.
Young adults.
Yes, young adults. Yes. Teaching me about hope. So, that's feeling like, here are the skills. How do you stay hopeful when you go through stuff, Like, I think the stress skills and what I've found from doing this work and little kids and college students, like, how do you create a whole movement around campus so that hope is more prevalent on campus than any kind of despair or addiction or anything happening? Like, how do you really create a movement on campus for hope? And I think that, my vision is for the youth to teach us how to activate the campus on it, and with or without the support of adults, but really driving the messaging around hope and the practicing of the skills and being peers, supportive peers on campus. And because I think sometimes adults can get in the way of,
definitely,
of hope. And, when we look at hopelessness, it's despair and helplessness. And there's just like a lot of roadblocks that are put up, I think, for hope. So
we're going to tear down all of those roadblocks this year.
I can feel it. I can feel it for sure. Yeah, no, absolutely.
Well, thank you so much for sharing your college vision with us. I know you've kind of gotten into your background a little bit. You said that your dad died by suicide, and that happened when you were 18, a freshman in college, which is just horrible. And then you had your own attempt in your 20s and kind of jumped around from school to school for a minute and then eventually stopped before you went back. So how did you deal with that? What were the stress skills that you used through all of that?
Yeah, absolutely. So actually, it's kind of surprising. I made it through school, I think, in 4.5 years. So every time I transferred, I got every credit I had transferred.
Oh my God.
Which I know.
That does not happen. That does not happen.
They probably, yeah, got it. I probably caused that now. Yeah, it was kind of amazing. But yeah, and when we teach hope, it's like we have stress hormones, right? So we get triggered by stuff and we have adrenaline and what are the other stress hormones? Sorry.
Cortisol, or something.
Yeah, I know. No, yeah. So norepinephrine, cortisol. So we have these stress hormones, right? And we need to regulate them and we need a certain amount of stress before it's the allostatic load. And then it goes where you become overstressed. And so it's like this dance with our stress hormones. And, when we're sad, we're angry, we're afraid, we need to manage that. And so that's what our stress skills are when we teach hope. And, I have a lot of trauma from growing up and it was so high in my stress. I mean, my cortisol, I'm sure, like, if I had measured it back then, was just through the roof. And so I, back then managed my stress in very unhealthy ways, which feel good at the time but aren't helpful for us. And so what I've learned through this work which is really amazing, is there are super healthy ways to learn how to manage your stress. And so I'm going to focus now on what I do in healthy ways, to manage all of the. So what I learned how to do is I learned how, with sadness, to sit in my sadness and like cry and express it. Or go out and hike, and if I'm feeling sad, and I just allow myself to mourn, where, I cried back then, but I was so afraid of how sad I would feel that, like, I thought it would kill me. Like, I literally thought my despair was so, like, I couldn't withstand that much sadness. I mean, I loved my dad so much, and I wanted to help him so much, so I do that. So I cry when I need to cry. I have learned to meditate, which has been just for my fear response. I get triggered and I stop breathing and I react. And so meditation has taught me to calm my thinking down to when I start ruminating, which is kind of one of our challenges to hope, or worrying about the future. Meditation has taught me that I don't have to react to everything that I feel, so I had this, especially when I was growing up, I would want to fix something or stop something or change something. I had to get involved. I couldn't just allow things to happen. And so meditation has really helped me to be able to do that. I never thought I could ever meditate, and never thought like that I was capable of it, and it's changed my life. I did it in group to start, and would sit for 45 to 60 minutes. I'm out with other people, and I found that really helped me kind of learn. And I do guided meditation sometime, but I meditate every day, and it just helps me calm down and like go into the day in a more relaxed, open state.
Wow, yeah. I need you to guide me in meditation every time I get anxious.
Yes. I mean, what's the cool thing about meditation is once you start working to meditate, you learn you can control it. Like, you're in control, and like we think we're not, and that we're just, but then we get our, like my first experience that transformed me with meditation is I was on a mat and in this group, and I got an itch, and I was like, and I'm the first, I think to myself, I tell myself, oh my gosh, I have to like, but it was so still in the room, and I was like, I know, I didn't move. I like, everyone's gonna know. And so I just said, what if I just like they teach you? Yeah, just like observe the itch. Oh my gosh. I was like, okay.
So do you not itch?
I did not itch it. No, I mean, I itch if I want it, but I'm like, also like, I don't have, like, I can just allow it and it'll shift and then it'll go away. And I think that's true with emotions as well. Like, I had to fix it, but if you just feel them and let them move through you and don't, work on your reaction and your acceptance of it, it's like, wow. I mean, and it's so simple, but it's completely transformed and changed my life and how I started, reacting to things. But that's when I realized I'm in control of it. I have the power to tell myself whatever I want. Like, I have to itch, or no, I don't have to itch it. I can allow it, and I can just observe it and not, see what happens with it. And I was like, oh my gosh, like, I don't have to, react or get, upset about everything and so that was pretty wild. The 90-second stress response. So, believe it or not, Miss Avery, I used to get terrified when I spoke in public. I mean,
when you spoke in public. And now you're like speaking in front of thousands of people.
I mean, it's so wild to me when I think back. So I would panic. I'd start to panic. You get that, like, I'm going to speak. And then all of a sudden and I could feel. And then it would just escalate. And then I would get red. I couldn't say anything. I would like freeze. I didn't know it was just to where I couldn't do public speaking at all. And
I'm like getting hot just you talking about it. I'm not even...
Don't make me do that. I know. Yes. And so what I learned was that I was activating my nervous system when I did that. So I was putting myself into fight or flight response. And we all do that when we speak. And what we do is we stop breathing. We get nervous and then we start thinking again, and we stop breathing. We don't even necessarily know we're not breathing. And then you set yourself further into your fight or flight response, and that just activates everything. And so the way to fix that is to breathe and just feel. So anytime I'm going to speak, I feel my feet on the ground and I just breathe. I'm like, I just be present and I got this. And it changed my life. Now I speak everywhere. And I mean, I really, like, I might, I get excited. And anytime I'm nervous, I'm like, I'm excited to do this. And that's a different change too.
So you changed your thoughts from nervous thoughts to excited thoughts.
Yes, exactly.
So I need to be like that.
So Avery is so excited. I am so excited. Exactly. And it's a whole different experience. It's way more fun to be excited. And then you're expressing that energy because you have energy around it,
Yeah, absolutely.
Different thing.
It definitely does make things a lot more fun.
Yes. And that's kind of the purpose of it too. I mean, we want to have fun doing this work. This work doesn't have to be like, it's, all
work. Yeah, it's fun work.
Yes, exactly. And making a huge difference. And then the other thing I did around speaking is, and this is, just a stress skill, I thought, I'm not necessarily doing this for myself and not necessarily just for my dad. I am doing it for all of the people all over the world who don't have a voice that need a voice, especially around mental health specifically. And so, or violence or addiction. And so, I'm like, bringing their energy with me, and it's like not about me, it's about everyone and how can we support everyone. And so that to me also gives me a much deeper why and a much bigger, stronger voice around it. And, sense of, and the same thing for you, you'll learn to you're bringing all of that with you when you go out and do this work. Mm-hmm.
I'm breathing.
How are you? Into your belly, because if you only do in your diaphragm or in your chest, that's like a stress, So it's like you gotta see your belly move, which
Belly breathe.
Belly breathing. Yeah.
So speaking of fun,
yeah,
let's get into some of your happiness habits.
Yeah,
talk about anything and everything you did to pull you out of that despair. And what habits did you create for yourself? What good habits did you create for yourself?
Yes, what healthy happiness habits. Yeah, so we have to get, I think of it like this. Like, this has helped me tremendously from a mental health and really, this is really mental health work. The despair, so hopelessness is really two things: emotional despair and then motivational helplessness. And so I consider stress skills and happiness habits kind of the mental health part of hope work, the work that I do. How do we get from despair to back to positive feelings? And so stress skills help us manage our despair, sort of fear, sadness, anger. And then happiness habits help us stay in that upper quadrant. And we call it our upstairs brain, where we're collaborative and communicating and, partnering and creative, and we can problem solve and all of those things. So happiness habits are important. They, dopamine, serotonin, oxytocin, these are some of our happy hormones, and they get released and they kind of help to combat the stress hormones. And so it's super important. So yeah, I mean, I did a lot that was really healthy for me. My friends, spending time with my friends and family, going to listen to music, hiking. I loved hiking. I had dogs. Yeah, I got dogs. I guess, yeah, when I was a junior in college, so I had 2 dogs, Duncan and Callie. They traveled all over the world with me. I did tons of traveling. I studied abroad. I did different things. I learned different things. Let's see. I wasn't great about nutrition back in those days, so it's something that I know now. Also, I drank a lot of alcohol, super unhealthy. I thought made me happy, but really a depressant. And so smoked a lot of pot as well, which, yeah, it's not a happiness. I thought it was managing my stress, but it was actually making my stress worse. So a very unhealthy stress skill that I had to learn. I had to learn to replace it with healthy stress skills.
I feel like that's a very common misconception.
It is absolutely a common misconception, especially with medical marijuana. People say medical and they think like, oh, so all marijuana must be healthy and it must have just a medicinal, it's very, there are very specific ways that marijuana has been used that's shown efficacy, but yeah, really bad on the developing brain, and your brain's developing until you're 25 years old, really. Yeah. So, and there's a lot of research published on anxiety and how it feels better in the moment, but it actually made the rebound it makes it worse. And, we use it because it does like calm your anxiety. It feels like it, but it does all kinds of other things. And, I really wish that I knew then what I know now about it. And was taught these skills at a young age of how to just healthier ways of navigating and getting those, getting my feelings regulated in ways that actually made me feel like were sustainable and made me, I just spent such a long time. Like I went from, it was after pot, it was cigarettes, pot, then I developed an eating disorder, so I became bulimic, like really, really quickly. And this was in my late 20s because I quit smoking pot, and then like, I think maybe sugar became like a replacement, but then it quickly became an addiction. And it's like, then I had to fight the eating disorder. And then I was like, after another, when really I was trying to manage my stress hormones. I was trying to figure out, and I was just using those things as ways to try to, had I been taught the healthy ways, how to understand them and healthy ways of managing them, especially when you learn as a very young, it's just much easier to integrate them into your life. So, yeah, it was, and so that from the happiness, habit standpoint, it took me a long time to figure out what were the healthy ways to get the nutrition. Now I'm really pretty diligent. I'm like 80% I eat healthy and 20% is, whatever. Now whatever, but I allow myself and
allow yourself some cheat days every now and then.
Right. Yes.
It was just too good.
I know. Yes. Yeah. 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 And then exercise is absolutely critical for me. So as I talked to you about, exercise, I can't understate. And, when you're not feeling up to exercise, it can be the hardest time to like motivate to do it. And again, when we likely need it the most. And so, there are studies that show it's as effective as antidepressants, some even more so than antidepressants, and you don't have all the negative side effects associated with antidepressants. And so, yeah, it's super critical for me, and it's hard because I've been injured in different ways. And so, like, I have to be super creative about how I get exercise. And my recent...
But exercise can be fun.
Right. Just another recent pickleball. Yeah, absolutely.
And I love every morning.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. There's not much hiking in Chicago. So I do. I walk on the lake,
Well, I know I get those voice notes from you probably at least once a day whenever you send them in the morning, it's always like, hey, Miss Avery, I'm on my morning walk.
I know. Exactly. Yes, I do that. Yes. I
It's
do
just
that
perfect
too.
time to think and reflect on the past couple of days, reflect on what you have going forward. Let's look for the future. Let's think about what we have going on today and think about what I need to do today and send me a voice note.
Exactly. So my brain works. Yes. Yeah. Really.
I love it. I know exactly what I need to do by the time I wake up.
Because I am an early riser. I have 5 a.m.
Oh, yeah.
Not early 5 a.m. Yeah.
That's early.
Yes. Very.
So does that have anything to do with inspired actions? Any of your goals? Like, did you have to set a goal for yourself to say, like, I'm going to wake up early and I'm going to go on a walk and then this is what I'm going to do today? Or how do you go about those inspired actions?
Yeah. So, and inspired actions are awesome. I mean, we're not necessarily taught how to set goals. And so there are a number of hope scientists. And so the work around hope science is generally around goal stuff, not as much the mental health. So I brought in for our work on hope, I brought in the stress, skills, and happiness habits because I believe managing those are so important to hope. And goals are equally important, obviously, but we're not necessarily taught how to set goals or what effective ways are to set goals and frameworks for goal setting. And, if you want something in life, and how do you get out of helplessness? It's really by taking actions. And so that's what we do in the inspired actions. We teach what's a SMART goal, like what's a stretch goal. Why is it important to have a mixture of both? What are intrinsic versus extrinsic goals? And intrinsic is meaningful for me. Extrinsic is we're doing it for external validation, like money or power, and those are goals. They don't make you happy. Like we know that about goals. And so it's like teaching these so that whatever we want, we have goals. We know how to set goals to get there. Like SMART goals are helpful because it stands for specific, measurable, attainable, relevant, and time-bound. There are a couple different ways they teach SMART goals, but that's the language we use. So when you think about it specific, you get really specific about the goal. Measurable, so you can know if you're actually achieving the goal or not. Attainable, they talk about false hope, and being like it's something I can't attain, like I win the lottery. When you go through the Shine Hope framework and you're forced to set a SMART goal about winning the lottery, you can kind of weed out your false hope because is it necessarily attainable? Like, is it realistic that you can attain that goal? Probably not based on the odds. So, not necessarily, so, so goal setting. So I mean, my mornings, I guess I set like goals around how I want to live my life and my personal health and my well-being and all of that. And so goals are a part of that and taking inspired actions towards that. I mean, I set goals for work, and so we can kind of measure progress and see where we're going, as you know, and they've been working on. And then we readjust goals as necessary. But I is about teaching how to actually do that. One of the things we know about anxiety and depression too is and goals is if you continue to pursue unattainable goals, you actually can develop clinical anxiety and depression, which this is, based on everything I've learned. And you think about those moments of hopelessness, like you have so many moments of hopelessness if you continue to go against unattainable goals. I mean, think about if I set a goal that you had to be on every college campus by, the end of the year or something, you had to,
cry.
I didn't know. You're like, but you continue and you just continue failing and have despair and helplessness continually. Of course, you develop clinical anxiety or depression, and so being really aware of that and aware of what are the goals we're setting for ourselves, what are the goals we're setting in the workplace, what are the goals we're setting for the world? And are we aware that that can happen? And are we setting up kind of support, I would say support along the way, or at least acknowledgments. I mean, we're trying to get an International Day of Hope at the UN.
Yeah.
You know, and the UN is having trouble reaching their sustainable development goals. And they've, 80% of the goals, I think, in the latest report, they're either standing still or going backwards on. And I'm, talking to UN ambassadors saying, do you know that this actually can you all can be developing clinical anxiety and depression for this? Is there even an awareness of that? And what are you doing to kind of counteract that and to support your employees and your partner organizations and whatnot? Because it's super important.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So that's inspired action.
Well, that's amazing. Goals are super, super important. And I definitely think they're very important for college campus. I would not have gone anywhere without setting goals for myself. So let's talk about your nursing network.
Okay, nursing, yes.
Nursing networks are super, super, super important. And to have those people around you, whether it's work or family or friends. Who did you have?
Yeah, so I had my brothers. I should say my brothers. Yeah, they were both really amazing. I have two older brothers. My mom, I had my mom, and, it was, at that time, there was a lot of trauma. My brothers went back to school. My mom worked. I did not want to go back to school. I did, pretty quickly, and I think that I probably should have gone into a treatment center or something and had some kind of, but I went back to school. But I had incredible friends. I was a member of a sorority, Alpha Chi, out there at University of Iowa. AKO, no. So now, sorry. So that was great. I had my grandma. I was really close with my grandma. So I had, my nourishing network was critical. My friends really took me through that time. And then I, had a boyfriend and then working. I mean, I loved, through school, but I loved working and colleagues and just learning. And I got sober it's been 20 years now. And so that also helped me eventually tremendous. I mean, that
is
changed my life. Yeah. Thank you. And then building mentors. So, I was in persistent hopelessness, and I believe that's really what happened to me because I was so focused on the despair of losing my dad and the helplessness, when you break down hopelessness, despair and helplessness, and because I wanted my dad back, and I was just focused on that.
Absolutely.
So of course I'm in persistent hopelessness and depressed. I mean, and once I learn how to manage my sadness in healthy ways, it's okay if I feel like I get sad still, and the helplessness to action. So I couldn't bring my dad back. One of the things we talk about is re-goaling. And as crazy and strange as this seems and maybe sounds about, I can't bring my dad back, but I can get other father-like figures in my life. And so that kind of became a new goal. How can I get that need met from other people as opposed to just focusing on my dad not being physically here now? I believe he's here all the time. And once I realized that, I can talk to him all the time. He's in his best, most beautiful state. He's always helping me. He's making connections all the time for me. I truly believe that. That opened up something for me too.
That is amazing.
Yeah.
Really a great way to process that loss.
Yeah. That's helped tremendously. Yeah.
Absolutely.
So, and I feel him here all the time now. Once I realize that, then I'm and I talk to him and I ask him for help and I, guidance and, and I just, even connecting to, no matter what you believe, connecting to his like how he was or his way of thinking. I mean, his, it just helps me tremendously. So, yeah.
Well, that just leads into eliminating challenges.
Yeah.
It sounds like that process of thinking really helped eliminate a lot of challenges for you.
Mm.
And how about you elaborate a little bit more on maybe some other things that you did to eliminate all of those challenges in your life and kind of move on and get out there?
Yeah, absolutely. So, yeah, and the challenges, like, we talk about them as the negative thinking patterns. Like, we have all these thought patterns that our brain kind of automatically does that are just unhelpful for us, right? And so we have automatic negative thoughts. We call them ants, or I think Dr. Amen called them ants, and so everyone uses that. Like Dr. Amen, is great research on a lot of this stuff. So those, thinking patterns, so the negative kind of again and again and again thought patterns. And so using my senses to get engaged and learning about my senses. And I wore a lot of black, and I started learning about colors and moods, as I mentioned, and started incorporating colors into my life. And, censoring smells, like how can I use more smells in my, like, that I love. And so really like loving, like experiencing my senses deeply. So that's one thing I did. So we try to control things outside of our control, so I, nothing about that.
No, I never heard that before.
So, yeah, I started thinking about, okay, what can I control in this situation? Stop focusing on what I can't control and can't change, and focus on what I can control and getting really specific about that. What I, could control is the other relationships I created in my life, the amount of fun I would have. My dad would have wanted me to have so much fun.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So, controlling the controllables, ruminating on what I could have done, should have done, would have done. Like, none of that's helpful. It's only helpful to reflect on the past if we can actually learn something from it and change our behaviors moving forward or do something different. But ruminating in the way of like it's my fault or internalizing failure around it, I'm a fail, like that's not helpful. And so
Definitely,
really focusing on that. Yeah, so those are some of the ways I overcame, and I had to learn that I was even doing those thinking patterns were even happening. And meditation helped me to stop a lot of those, slow down my thoughts, focus on being in the present moment, kind of learning even how to do that I had control over the voice in my head, or could, the voice in my head isn't me. So Michael Singer does great stuff around that, the surrender experiment, but he talks a lot about the voice in your head. And also, negative beliefs. So, just things that we say to ourselves that are totally hurtful and not true and unkind, learning how to counteract them with affirming beliefs was a important part, and saying them until I believe them. I mean, I think there was a very deep sense of worthlessness that I felt about myself, because my dad was like everything. And so when your dad takes his life, it's like, what was I, or what am I? And so learning, like, he didn't define my value, doesn't define my value. It's not a reflection of me. It's a reflection of where he was. And so, really important to kind of program my brain around that too, which took time and work and all of that. The one other thing I want to mention about goals and hope overall is that it's really important that we write stuff down that we want, and that we check in with people regularly about whatever it is we hope for or want in our lives, so that we can, have accountability and move forward with other people. And I think that's why cultivating really strong and healthy networks is also so important to hope and our ability to hope.
absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
Well, thank you so much for sharing your story. It was incredible, and I know that it's going to inspire so many people. And this company is going to inspire and help so many people. So thank you so much for coming.
You're welcome. Absolutely.
Thank everyone for watching / listening if you're not watching.
Yes.
We are going to have a college course on the U of A campus the end of this month.
Sign it off. Look out. University of Arkansas.
We're coming.
Yeah.
Thank you for listening. Thank you, Miss Kathryn, for coming.
Absolutely. Yeah, if you're in Arkansas, definitely, or anywhere really, be sure to connect with Avery. She's really amazing. She's got a pretty powerful hope story that she shared on Shine Hope Story. She shared on my podcast as well. So check it out.
Hope Matrix.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, and if you want to bring hope to your college campus, let us know. Help join in the movement. We need hope to be louder than fear and anger and kind of all of the other things that are kind of out there in the world right now. It's super important.
Definitely. All right. Thank you guys for listening.
Thanks so much.
Thank you all for listening to the Hope Matrix on Campus podcast. I hope to have provided you with actionable insights and a framework that you can use to start activating higher hope in your life today. And don't forget that hope is measurable and teachable. This program is designed to assist you in learning about hope, but it should not be used for medical advice, counseling, or other health-related services. I, Fred, the Shine Hope Company, and myself, Avery Peel, do not endorse or provide any medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment. I am not a medical doctor. The information provided here should not be used for the diagnosis or treatment of any medical condition and cannot be substituted for the advice of physicians, licensed professionals, or therapists who are familiar with your specific situation. Consult a licensed medical professional or call 911 if you're in need of immediate assistance, and be sure to know the crisis hotline 988 if you are in need of support. We are better with hope. Please feel free to check out the shinehopecompany.com, where we list all of our resources around how to hope. We have a lot of free programs for how to hope, including the 5-day challenge, our hope infographic with a lot of skills that showcase how to hope, and articles of how to incorporate hope in your life. We have the Hope Beat Weekly, which is a weekly newsletter that shares strategies for hope. We have my Shine Hope Story template, so you can write your own Shine Hope story today. Also, my Shine Hope Hero, so we can share what our heroes are doing to activate hope in our lives. And this is especially good with youth, so they can start looking up to people that have overcome similar challenges to them and seeing how these heroes use the Shine Hope framework. We have a Hopeful Minds for Teens program and Hopeful Minds Overview Educator Guides. We have a new evidence-based college course so you can activate hope on the college campus. There are programs in the workspace, overview courses, 90-minute courses for learning the what, why, and how to hope. What I want you to know about hope is it's a skill you've got to practice to become more hopeful. It's easy to fall into despair and helplessness when we deal with challenges in life, and it takes intentional work and practice to get to hope. And yet it is always possible. So no matter what life brings, keep shining hope. Thanks so much for listening and have an awesome day.